This is the CHGO Cubs podcast. My name is Corey. I am joined, as always, by Brendan. We are coming to you on Sunday, June 2nd. And Brendan, the Chicago Cubs have lost 6 consecutive series.
Hello. I feel great, Corey. I mean, I love spending Sundays with you, losing most Sundays, talking about a 2 games below 500 team and all the offensive woes we've been seeing. So happy Sunday to you. You look great, by the way. At least you got that going for you. But we have a lot to talk about.
You too. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So the Cubs have lost 6 straight series. They have also, in the last couple weeks, lost a series to everybody else in this division. Every single team.
True?
In the NL Central.
The entire division.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, do you not remember?
No,
that?
I do. I'm just trying to make sure it's not a nightmare, but it is a real outcome. Okay.
Yeah. So I don't know, Brendan. I saw Tyler in our YouTube chat say it. If you're joining us on YouTube, hello. Throw a comment, anything in the chat. Let us know what you're thinking if you're listening on those podcast feeds later. Hello, welcome. We appreciate you. Tyler said it in our YouTube chat earlier. You really thought Saturday was such a weird game, such a delayed start time. You get Seiya with the makeup grand slam. Dansby, big hit. You've been waiting for him to get that big hit to win that game. You don't expect a game like that to just remove all of the issues that you've seen with this team. But starting a new month, you have the opportunity to win a series at home in your building against the team that has not been playing good baseball. You really wanted that game on Saturday to be one of those games that we look back and go, that kind of jolted them. It turned the page a little bit. It changed the momentum, and just an absolute dud here on Sunday. The Cubs lose 3 of 4, of course, to start this week in Milwaukee, and then they drop 2 of 3 here to the Reds. Just a real bad stretch for this team, Brendan. You have an off day coming up, and then you welcome the very bad Chicago White Sox. But, at this point, I think since the start of May, you're playing at a pretty similar clip to those Chicago White Sox. So I don't know how strong or not that matchup is. And, Brendan, just looking at things now, you're tied with the St. Louis Cardinals in the division. You are much closer to the last place Cincinnati Reds than you are to the first place Milwaukee Brewers. You're 7.5 games out of first place in the division. I believe 8 in the loss column. So you've really done some damage there. We talked when this skid started, just don't dig too deep of a hole.
Oh, you're kind of digging deep.
As far as the division is concerned, they're continuing to dig, which we asked them not to. Very nicely, we asked them not to. Wild card, you're still right there. I think they would still be a playoff team if things ended right now. So you can I expect listeners, people in the chat, social media, everybody's going to have a different kind of way of feeling about this. But as we talked about, some of these stretches on offense were kind of to be expected. And we'll get into some of the stuff that's, I think, maybe a little more frustrating from this weekend. But overall, 6 straight series losses. I don't think you've won consecutive games since the beginning of May. I mean, there's really not there's a million ways to point out how bad this stretch has been for this team. It just kind of depends which one you want to stick with.
Are you surprised they're playing this poorly? Is this worse than your expectations? Realistically, not your optimism. I think you and I are optimistic because we're Cubs fans, but realistically, does this 500-ish record surprise you in June, being 2 below 500?
No.
Yeah. It doesn't.
Yeah, no, look, we talked about it. I don't want to belabor kind of some of the conversations that we've had, but this was always one of the possible outcomes. You tweeted this the other day, even if you're a believer in those projection systems, this was a low 80s projected team, which means you have the really good outcome that's, a handful of games better than that, maybe pushing towards 90, and you have a worse outcome. If things don't go right, if players don't hit their ceilings, guys get hurt, this, that, and the other, that's a handful below that 84 or so win total. So them kind of hovering around 500, going up, going down, always something that was pretty possible. And they've been very fortunate with how their starting pitching has performed thus far, even with some injuries and guys stepping into those roles. You expect some of this offense to be better, but as you're seeing, you saw this week, Shota's not going to be perfect every time he goes out there. Ben Brown gave you a really great start in Milwaukee. Not so good today. Like you didn't capitalize enough on that starting pitching run. And, maybe we see it flip a little bit. Now you see some starting pitchers not be as good. You don't have everybody in the rotation putting up a 2 ERA or something like that. Maybe the offense starts to lift a little bit, but you really, you're kind of hoping they meet each other somewhere. And I think they might be passing each other by.
We're 2 months in. The question I have, what does his team project to be by the end of the season? If we look at the current projections and what that aligns to a win-loss, what is that? Right now by Fangraphs today, going into Monday, 81-81 record is their expectation. For them to reach 81-81, here are the projections that get them there. Seiya Suzuki, 355 weighted on base average. Seems pretty fair, right? I think 355 is an average projection. I think you and I are more optimistic it can be above that, but pretty fair. The other projections, you have Christopher Morel at 330. Okay, so those are your 3 and 4 hitters, and they're not too far out there. Those are kind of realistic, which is somewhat disconcerting. Then you have lower projections. You have Bellinger at 327. They're paying him to be well above that. PCA, good defense, just a 300 weighted on base average. And then the rest of the team, Hap, Dansby, Nico, they hang out around 320, 330. All of this is to say is that for them to be a 500 team, their projections are not appearing shocking. 355 for Seiya. Oh, that's pretty good. I think he can get there. I would expect that too. And that's where the disconcerting aspect of this team lies. For pitching, Shota, they project him to be worth 2 more WAR in addition to his current value. That's actually quite a big ask. Justin Steele, 1.1 WAR for the rest of the season. Maybe an underwhelming ask. Therefore, when you look at these projections, then the question is, how do you get above 81 and 81? Well, Morel needs to not be a 330 WOBA guy. We need to see that extreme outcome form. Well, Seiya can't just be a 355 weight on base average guy. He needs to be 370. So these are explicitly the trends we need to see. Seiya needs to be one of the top performers in the league. We need to see Morel also be one of the top performers in the league. We need to see Cody Bellinger emulate what we saw post-June of last season, and then the rest of the team can kind of hang out on this averages territory. When I watch these games, that's why I'm dialed in on Seiya. I'm dialed in on Morel. I'm dialed in on Michael Busch, who, by the way, is a 330 weight on base average projection too, which is actually quite fair and maybe higher than I expected. I need to see those guys take massive leaps, because if they don't, then an 81 projection seems spot on. And Jed Hoyer going into the year even said this. We need guys to overproduce their projections. Those are exactly the guys we need to see start producing.
Yeah, I mean, Brendan, we have some specific things we want to talk about. Jordan Wicks, getting close to coming back. So I think it'll be interesting to see how the Cubs manage that. Obviously, Ben Brown struggled today, but we've seen some really good flashes from him. See what the Cubs do rotation-wise. So I want to talk about that. We'll talk about PCA coming back up, some of the trends we're seeing from him, his playing time, kind of how the Cubs can maneuver some of these guys around. We saw Michael Busch not starting again on Sunday. So kind of some hints at maybe how they're going to approach this, at least to start. What I do want to start, though, and it doesn't, this doesn't have to be like a big rant or anything like that. I'll save that. I'll let Cody do that. I'm sure he's ready for it.
The Nick Madrigal.
But I will say, Brendan, and I think the loss on Friday really highlighted this. But we saw more of this type of play throughout the weekend. We've talked about the offense. You're lacking those true superstars, those absolute elite, just top 1% hitters that other teams have and get those performances. You go and look at the numbers from Aaron Judge recently, just astounding numbers to go along with Juan Soto. They're stars. Those are legitimate stars in this league. Cubs don't have those guys.
Did you say Juan Soto?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. The
Cubs, only the Yankees were allowed to get him in this offseason.
Just checking, you said Juan Soto. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So that stuff is what it is. That's on Jed. We knew that. We knew this offense wasn't constructed to blow guys out. And, sometimes you look at these games, starting pitching has been really good. And if a guy like, Juan Soto or Shohei Ohtani hits a homer off you, hey, tip your cap. Those are great players. It happens. There's some stuff you can't control in this game. When you build a roster, they're going to perform how they perform. What you can control and what has been really disappointing in the first few months from this team, this is the second worst defensive team in baseball so far this year. They are either second or dead last in outs made on the bases. Now, some of that's going to be context dependent. You see plays where the runner's going or they try to get someone in a rundown. Of course, it's not all like that. But we know watching these games, they have made a lot of outs on the bases, taking an extra base they shouldn't be taking, making a bad read on a ball, getting caught in between on a fly ball and then getting thrown out.
It happened last series. Dansby at third base on PCA's base hit. Madrigal's.
Yes.
Willie Harris is awful.
And that's on Willie Harris, but Madrigal's not a good base runner. He's not here anymore. We don't have to talk about it. I would rejoice in that, but I don't really feel like it. Like, I don't care. That's not the primary thing. I want the team to be good.
You're going to talk about PCA.
Sure. Those two things. You look at some of their numbers, how many blown saves you have.
8.
Injuries happen, things happen, but there are things that this team has done that are just flat out unacceptable, Brendan, for them to be at the bottom of the league, not the middle of the league, the bottom, the absolute bottom in somewhat controllable categories is just flat out unacceptable.
Not just controllable, but their intended best feature.
Yes.
That was what they sought out to accomplish, to be one of, if not the best defensive team.
Yeah. And, I know people have talked about it too. You have two catchers who can't throw anybody out. You can't control the other team's running game. You can't block pitches. I mean, these things are just unacceptable, Brendan. We can look at guys like Ian Happ when he was struggling and say, we know what he is. He needs to get going. And he has. To his credit, he has played a lot better of late. Those numbers creeping back up towards his career norms, as you and I think a lot of others kind of cautioned people to relax and that they would. You can look at Dansby and say he needs to get it going, even if it's just towards his career norms. He's not going to carry this offense. He's not a superstar hitter, but he needs to perform at a level that is close to what he was signed to do. And he hasn't done that so far this year. But these other things, I don't know. Counsell can't run the bases for these guys. Counsell can't make the throws or field the balls. But to be at the bottom in some of these things is really, really disappointing, Brendan. And as we talked about, this offense is not going to blow other teams out. They're not built like that. We have said the word margins a million times. And not only are they not excelling on those things, they're not doing the little things better than every team they play. They're doing it worse than almost everybody in the league, Brendan, outside of most of the starting staff, right? And a couple of relievers. This team has just not been good enough, and they have been too sloppy in areas that they absolutely have to be better at. So I don't know if that's something on Counsell. I don't think that it is, but for how good of a manager he is and how much I hold his value in high esteem, this has been really disappointing. Those things. There's a lot of stuff that's gone on with this team that I don't really pin on the manager. The roster's the roster. But they have got to clean some of this stuff up, Brendan, because it cannot continue any further.
There's two ways to look at it. First is this going to continue? Is their poor play, defense, and base running likely to continue? That's the one discussion. I would lean towards no, because it has been 2 months and the track record is too large to insinuate it will continue. The second way is to look at this and be asking the question, how is this happening? What is the process that has led to a 2-month sample of the worst defensive output? And does that need refinement? I think that's a fair question. We've talked and praised Counsell effusively, and a lot of the process appears to be right from Counsell. However, when your team is making this many errors, absolutely criticism is deserved. for the entire coaching staff. The play over the last week was atrocious in the field. I understand Saturday, it's a tsunami out there. I totally get that. The gaps in judgment, though, were completely irrelevant to the weather, not calling for who's going to catch a pop-up down the right field line. This is stuff that is completely avoidable. Again, I don't think this is going to continue going forward. These guys have won Gold Gloves. They've played together for more than 1 year now. It's likely not going to continue. But at the same time, to just brush it off as if it's some random thing, I'm not quite sure either. I think it does deserve introspection to look at the process and ask the question, what is going on? Because this is something that was so unexpected.
Well, and again, whatever the answer, it just can't continue. You cannot have an offense that is constructed this way and not be good at all these other little things. I've used the comparison before about getting to, like in a game of basketball, getting to loose balls. In hockey, the 50-50 pucks in the corner. Like, that's where a lot of games are won and lost, and the Cubs are losing it every single day, Brendan. And again, you can look at the ending of the game on Friday as, is that Willie Harris's fault? It's a terrible send, but maybe he's being over aggressive because the offense hasn't been that good. Madrigal's not a good base runner. Ellie's got a great arm there at short. There's a lot that goes into that play, but that play really just summed up, I think, so much of what we've seen. It's just an unacceptable outcome. He was out by 20 feet. The game's on the line. Your best hitter is standing in the on-deck circle, and now you've taken the bat out of his hands, and the game is over. And it just looks awful. It looks like something where you're like, this is like little league stuff you're watching from this team. It's embarrassing.
It's a top to bottom representation of the frustrations of the organization. Top to bottom, in that the front office fields players with poor projections and poor expectations in Nick Madrigal. It's disappointing that the manager pinch hits him in the 9th inning in high leverage. It's disappointing that Willie Harris, the coach, is sending him on one of the best arms for a shortstop. And it's disappointing that Nick Madrigal is literally taking a turn wide enough to go into Lake Michigan, Corey. All of that is representative of the issues of the organization, that we need refinement. And frankly, Corey, I need results, okay? And that's the frustration we have. If you zoom out, we're, of course, looking at these few games as representations. Zooming out, though, still, to read off those projections just to reach 500, that is the representation I'm focusing on. And that what is really draws my ire, even though at times during those games and in weeks like this, I get frustrated on the day-to-day operations, but that frustration then leads to zooming out and still capturing my frustration at the process that led to this position that we're in 4 years. That's where I can't shake right now.
No, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, look, you and I, plenty of other people were not super thrilled with how this team was constructed and how I said it all offseason that my main disappointment was that this team, even on paper, was not a certain favorite in this division. And that was the real shortcoming. You can kind of look at that or how they would have addressed that, in different specific ways. But like ultimately, the idea that this long into this process and in a division that isn't very good, you are kind of a coin toss of being a playoff team or being the best team in this division, not good enough, especially after last year. You just did this last year. And so it was kind of the same thing. And so I've been frustrated with that, but the roster is what it is. And for them to be this bad in these areas, it is just completely unacceptable.
It's unacceptable. And they know it.
I think going forward, PCA's up. We'll talk about him, some of the adjustments you made. You have to ride with that. You have to put PCA in center, Bellinger at first, your Gold Glovers up the middle, and you need to turn the defense around because that is where all of this starts. We talk about this all the time. They play so many one-run games. Every night we're talking about their runners in scoring position numbers or which inning they could have added on, but they didn't. Which reliever is coming in and struggling. It's exhausting. But that's what happens when you play one-run games. And everybody's fighting about the bullpen and this. Half of it is just the offense. They don't score enough runs. You score 3 runs every game. You ask your pitchers to be absolutely perfect. And that part of it, I think, Brendan, no better highlighted than how that Milwaukee series began. Justin Steele, Ben Brown threw 15 innings of one hit, like 1-run baseball. They almost lost both of those games. They only won the Ben Brown game because they scored 5 runs in extra innings. Yeah. It's almost impossible to lose 2 games when your starting pitchers perform like that. And the Cubs were real close
sometimes.
So I don't know. I want to get into some more of the player specifics, and I don't want to rant about that too much. Yeah. It's a new month, and they got to clean it up. And I do expect at least the defense should be better. Yeah. But the Seiya stuff is confusing. Like you said, it was raining, but we've seen him have just real odd troubles out there at times, just dropping balls, misreading balls, things like that, some bad throws. That's got to get cleaned up. Christopher Morel is obviously, that was a calculated risk. It's a work in progress. I thought he's looked a lot better as far as the throws he's making go. I thought this week he really made some good throws from third base. Didn't start there on Sunday. David Bodie starting there. So we'll see what that looks like going forward. But that was part of your calculation. Like that was something you were baking in. But Ian Happ is a Gold Glover. PCA is a massive defensive prospect with just huge potential. In center field, Cody Bellinger's a Gold Glover. Your middle infielders are Gold Glovers. You got to figure out a way to clean it up. And we talked last week. I don't know what the solution is at catcher. Unfortunately, that's just kind of, at least defensively, just an absolute mess. But it is. I don't know. I had to start there because that's just the stuff. We can debate the offense and the roster construction, but at this point, it's June. The roster is what the roster is. They're not all of primetime. Barry Bonds is not going to walk through those clubhouse doors magically. So we kind of have to figure out how to make this work and shuffle the order or shuffle playing time to make these players work and get more out of the offense. The other stuff, though, you just got to be better. Guys have to do their jobs, man. Like, I know a lot of people be mad at Counsell, and I'm not sure process-wise, like, what I want the manager to do, but you're the manager, dude. You're the highest paid manager in Major League history, and your team is a sloppy mess. Like, whatever you got to do. I don't know if that's benching guys, holding meetings. Hey, after the game, we just lost a series to the Reds. Like, you're not going home. Get back out there. We're running the bases.
You would know. You're a former
I don't know.
manager,
Yeah.
Former
well, I would go, I would go Herb Brooks style. I would have him, running back and forth below the whistle. Again. Do it again. Yeah.
You're a whistle
First
guy?
to third, do it again. Yeah. Okay. So I don't know. But it's just, it's really disappointing. And as we've said, Brendan, like I believe you're still a wild card team. If the season ended today, I can look at that right now. I have it up on my screen. You would still be tied for that last wild card spot if things ended right now, but you're 7.5 back in the division, 8 in the loss column. That's a big hole. And we've seen this, franchises dig out of it before. But it's tough to rely on another stretch like they had before the deadline last year, Brendan, to bail you out and like turn you into buyers and, kind of lift you out of the hole that you dug. It's not that easy. And we'll see, but I don't know, and especially you look at this, like this is a series against the last place team in your division at home, and you nearly got swept.
Yeah. Listen, we can talk about all of our frustrations, air out our frustrations, or we can talk about what needs to happen to reach the goal that you and I want them to reach. What is the way forward for them to get to 90 wins, right? That's why when we're talking about PCA in the next segment, or Michael Busch, or Cody Bellinger, or Morel, we know exactly now in June what needs to happen. So this is the position. It's actually kind of illuminating, because we had talked for months in the offseason what could happen, what are the trends that we want to see early on. Well, we've seen all that now early on in April and May. Some of the trends look positive. Some of them have been a disaster. The process with Nick Madrigal was a complete failure of expectations from the front office. Having no third baseman, assuming that Madrigal would be a sufficient third baseman, has been a complete and total miss, as well as the catcher position has been as well. I'll read the ad break here. I don't want to get too far into this, and we'll come back. We'll talk about some of these player specifics. But I'm with you. I'm frustrated. At the same time, I'm stupidly optimistic. I think in my mind, I can see it working out. I'm not expecting it. I'm skeptical it does work out, but I'm nevertheless optimistic based on some of the trends we are seeing. And also, I'm just an idiot. So, it's who I am. Okay. Let's do our first ad break here from Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. We are the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. It's just you against the numbers. Baseball season's underway. There's no better way to cash in on the action in Prize Picks. Add your favorite players from the diamond to your Prize Picks lineups all season long. And whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, or first inning runs, none of which the Cubs do, take your pick of more or less and add them to your Prize Picks lineup today. I've been playing Prize Picks. I did, however, get rewarded for taking a stay to hit a home run on Saturday night. You can get rewarded too. Download the app today. Use code CHGO for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code CHGO for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, pick more, pick less. It is that easy. It's grilling season. Get your pork. People who are active need more protein than the average American. And in fact, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, the Dietitians of Canada, and the American College of Sports Medicine recommend 1.2 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day for athletes, depending on their training. So for a 150-pound person, that's about 81 to 136 grams of protein per day. 1 3-ounce serving of pork provides 23 grams of high-quality protein that can help active individuals build and preserve muscle. Elevate your protein game with lean pork, a powerhouse of natural goodness. Savor the flavor, savor the gains, and celebrate any occasion by enjoying the best pork produced by Illinois pig farmers. From your sausage and bacon for breakfast to pulled pork or juicy chops hot off the grill, it's an entire season dedicated to pork and the people behind the product. This is paid for by the Illinois pork producers. Generations of commitment.
All right, Brendan. So just
we
looking.
We did have a super chat, by the way, before we.
Oh, yes. Let's get to that.
So this is from TJ. How does this team go from clutch to ice cold? That is the golden question. We'll talk about some of the player specifics and get into it.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into it. It's a tough one. Appreciate the super chat, but it's you need guys to play better, man. I mean,
is that all it is?
That's all it is. I mean, look, it sounds simple, but yeah, I mean, you need guys to step up and do their jobs. As far as, the overall clutchness, I don't know. I mean, unfortunately, as we've said a million times, like you just don't have those stars. You don't have those guys that are made for those moments. And on any given day, I think we're going to start to see maybe better outputs here. But, for the last month or so, you've had at times at least 3 spots in the lineup that are just absolute black holes. And so that puts a lot of pressure on the other guys. And a lot of these other guys, as we keep saying, they're not 3-4 hitters. Yeah. If you're waiting for Dansby Swanson to carry your offense, you're going to be waiting a long time. He's just not that hitter. He never has been.
He's not being paid to do it either.
No. So that's just part of it. Looking through our YouTube chat here.
To Ryan Herrera today, to interrupt you there, Corey, but it's on your point. Correct Counsell said, quote, our hitters are going to get hit in those spots. They will come. I promise you it will come. But when you're going through it, it doesn't look like it, but it's going to come, end quote. So Craig thinks it's going to come, Corey.
Great.
Forever the optimist. Correct Counsell.
I do think that I think they'll be better. I think some of these guys have a track record that you're deferring to. We've talked a lot about Morel and the underlying stuff looking good, and I think those numbers will eventually pay off for him. The process is good. Seiya, when he's going, and he's had a good weekend, he has the potential to be a real star on offense, but he's got to put it together for sustained periods of time.
Well, the team requires that.
Sure. And also he's got to kind of figure out a way to stop making outs on the bases baseball and catch simple fly balls.
That would help.
You're going to see a lot of talk about him being the DH. I know Lucas talked about it before. But those are simple plays that he's messed up, not routinely, but enough that you at least start to go, you raise your eyebrows. What is the deal here? Why does this happen so frequently? So I don't know. Looking at our YouTube chat, I saw a comment from, I believe it was Michael Wagner. He says the Cubs have not led by more than 2 runs in any game since the Atlanta game 18 days ago, other than that 10th inning in Milwaukee when they put up, I think it was 5. It's rough. I don't know. Let's talk. PCA's back. Let's talk about how should they construct this lineup to kind of optimize what they have. You can't make something out of stuff that isn't there. As I said, this is not all of a sudden going to turn into a juggernaut of an offense. I don't think they should be as feeble as they have been for the past month. And there's a lot of different numbers that kind of highlight that. I know I was looking at something from our guy Ryan Herrera that I think they've been the worst or one of the worst teams with runners in scoring position from May 1st to June 1st. Lowest in the MLB, 184 average with runners in scoring position, 1 for 11 in such situations in the loss to the Reds on Sunday. Cody Bellinger talked to Ryan and, said that team's pressing. Guys want to be the hero. Guys kind of put too much pressure on themselves to come up in those spots. But there's just so much like bad about this offense when you look at the numbers. I don't think they're that feeble, though, Brendan. And don't twist my words. I don't think they're going to be great, but I think they're better than what we've seen. But when you're looking at what we have, what is available to us, what is the best daily construction of this lineup? And I bring up, PCA because he's back. And I know you liked a lot of the trends that you saw before he was even sent down. And then he kind of continued that when he was with Iowa. He's pimping home runs. He's yelling at people. It's great. Great energy, right? Yeah. You love it. But in particular, like someone like Mike Tauchman is a really good illustration, I think, of one of the key issues with this offense. Mike Tauchman has been great for this team, but he's been good and other guys have struggled that they've been forced to lean on him too much, right? Is Mike Tauchman someone who should play 150 games or start almost every day?
We don't know.
Well, no, is my answer. I think he's a great complementary player, but you're getting good production and you're squeezing too much out of it. Not everybody's going to be able to do that. He doesn't have that huge track record at the major league level. So he struggled recently in his last however many games. Those numbers have gone way down. And that's what happens because they're kind of overcompensating. Hey, this guy's struggling, but he's been giving us professional at bats. He's been good for us, but you're asking too much of some of these guys. So now that PCA is back, how would you kind of maneuver these things? Who's sitting more often than they have been? Michael Busch hasn't played last few games. Like, how would you construct this so that the starting pitching staff does not have to go out there and think if they give up 2 runs, they're going to take an L?
I construct the lineup and the roster utilization in a way to achieve the peak outcome. That differs from what we've seen over the past few years with Ross, the front office, and the early going. Not so much, I think, with Jed or with Craig. I think he's been more urgent at times, but still playing within the margins. What does that mean specifically? Well, I'm playing PCA 80% of the time at the minimum. What does that do for Mike Tauchman? You can still play him an equal amount of time. What does that do for Michael Busch and Patrick Wisdom? They're going to have to take a back seat. If Michael Busch is a 1 notch above Patrick Wisdom, then that is basically 50% playing time. So in a 2-series sample in 6 to 7 games, Busch plays 3 to 4 times in no series, and PCA plays around 5 to 6 times. That's what I want. The reason I want this is for 2 reasons. The first is I believe PCA's peak value is one of those ways you push that win projection towards 90. And at the same time, I think he needs it to even get to that peak potential in the form of adjusting fast, really fast. And it's good for his development and good for the Cubs as well. That's what I want to see. For Michael Busch, unfortunately, we need to achieve those types of high outcome performances. And he's been good, don't get me wrong, but right now, on paper, this team is believed to be 81-81 with a weighted on base average from Busch of well above league average of 330, right? So he's, that's going to be kind of a surprise long-term if he even achieves that this year. Therefore, give me the guy who has 4 to 5 win potential in PCA right now to get more at-bats. I believe Michael Busch can be a productive guy. I like what I've seen. I think the swing mechanics are unique. I think it suggests some type of trace where he can provide a lot of extra base hits and fly balls, kind of like Chris Bryant over the years. But it's June. This team is underperformed. I need Bellinger to start performing as he's being paid. I need Dansby to return to league average offense. And right now, those guys haven't shown obvious trends of getting to there yet. So I need to start making decisions. And the decision is I'm making the riskiest one to get the best, highest potential outcome. And that right now is PCA. 80% minimum. And if I'm being greedy, I'm playing him almost 90, 95%.
Like where would you hit him in the lineup?
I think right now you put him in the lower part of the lineup, 7, 8, 9. He needs to show signs that he can do this every single day. But I believe he can. And a lot of the value right now for me in PCA is on base paths and and defensively. So that's where a lot of the motivation to use him in 90%. But the at-bats look really good. I think there's potential for him to move on up, but I don't think it's likely right now. It definitely is possible.
Yeah. Were you disappointed at all that it was David Bodie getting the call for Madrigal and then getting right in the starting lineup on Sunday?
No. I'm disappointed that David Bodie's the option, right?
Well, I guess that's the question. Is he?
The solution's not on the current roster right now. So we can get Luis Vasquez back up. He's barely played third base. Defensively, a shortstop, he's great. But they have missed on Mastroboni. They have missed on Madrigal. They have missed on those infielders yet again in almost every season now. So they're going to have to make a trade if Bodie's not going to be that guy. I'm fine giving him the opportunity. I like Bodie. I really do. The attitude, the work ethic, the ability for him to decrease his whiffs over the past couple of years. Sure, it's interesting, but I'm still skeptical.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as I said, look, the short on that is that I think it represents what the problem was with Madrigal in the first place, is that at his worst, Bodie has a discernible skill, which is power. Even if he strikes out every at-bat, he might run into one. He has the power to hit a major league home run. Madrigal's got nothing. No discernible skill.
The counter to that was the defense at third base,
and he was rating poorly at that.
And so that was and that's why I was kind of nailing this down during the offseason, because he graded so well at outs above average, and that was a sticking point. Fairly, I understand it, to many fans. I totally get that, but the way he was providing that value was a question mark for me, because he was playing so far in. He was playing among the shallowest third basemen in the league last year. They gave him more leeway this season. They started playing him further back, about 5 feet further back on average. And the eye test passes what we're seeing. He's making bad errors at times, despite making some good plays at times. It's just not good enough to justify that.
Yeah, he's gone. He's not a Major League Baseball player. Hopefully I never have to talk about him again. I'm not going to turn this into, I'm not here to dance on the grave, but
you kind of
talk to me on Twitter. I'll do plenty of that. Or in the CHGO Cubs Discord, let me know.
Oh, look at that.
I don't want to use airtime for it, though. But, at least Bodie provides something of that. I do sort of share. I know our guy Cody Delmendo was tweeting some of this and talking to us, offline about some of this. I do share his kind of disappointment that, they had Vasquez up. He barely played. And when they finally do jettison Madrigal, it's for a guy that has shown he can't really keep it together at the major league level in any sort of consistent way. So I'll take the power over Madrigal's zero skills, but I don't know. You've got a lot of young guys, and I know, calling up Owen Casey is extreme, and he doesn't play third base. It's just an example. Calling up Matt Shaw is extreme.
Yeah, I'd call him up too.
So, but that's what I mean. So maybe they don't want to get that aggressive with it, but it's you're calling up a guy over 30 who's shown he can't really have that level of success at the major league level. It's kind of just all right, it's slightly better. It's not a complete waste of your last roster spot. But when your roster isn't that good, you'd really like every single one of those guys in that clubhouse to really be valuable and have earned that spot and provide something to you. Looking back on some of this lineup talk, and then we'll hit our second ad break. We can do a Madrigal roast, but not today. Okay. When the team is a mess, I can't devote too much time to Nick Madrigal. It's not fair. Other guys need to do their jobs as well.
Talking about him, just saying.
I do agree. Comment in our YouTube chat from Twig Woodman says putting PCA in front of Amaya is insanity. I do agree with that. I know I'm not sure the ideal spot for PCA. I would prefer he not be in front of Amaya or Gomes, or just guys who really are struggling that mightily on
Oh, in
offense.
terms of like pitch selection for him?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't need to. I don't know that I would necessarily put him in at leadoff. I think that's putting a lot of pressure on him,
No.
and I'm not sure that's the best way to have him. He's made a lot of really good adjustments at the major league level, and you want him to stick in those habits, not feel the pressure of leading off and needing to get on in front of Cody Bellinger or whoever it
If
is.
he starts producing results, and you can start
Sure, but
having
to
those
start.
discussions and moving
But
on.
I do agree with that comment. I do think you need to get him at least one spot away from guys who can't hit their way out of a paper bag. The other thing I would say, and
You're
this
heated
one
up today,
is,
I can tell.
say
This is
again?
you're heated up today more than usual.
I'm disappointed, dude.
Man,
Like, we
I
were
haven't seen you
concerned
this
about
heated
so
up
much
in
of
a
this in the
year.
offseason, and every day it's just like, gee, the offense isn't good enough. Who could have known? Who could have possibly predicted that? Oh, gee, you had a couple injuries in your bullpen, and now it's a big mess. Who could have seen any of this coming? And who could have seen that this is not a good enough standard for a team that's valued at $5 billion and charges everybody $300 to take their family to a baseball game? It's annoying, dude. Like, this is another season where we're like, they're 8 games behind the Milwaukee Brewers, Brendan. Like, it's annoying. I feel justified in being annoyed. As I said, I think they'll be better in a lot of these regards. They're not going to be the second worst defense in the league all year.
Look how stupid you are. Look how
I know.
stupid
You look stupider. You're the one saying you're optimistic. I think
so
you look
funny.
stupider
You thought
today.
you were complaining about this. You're doing a podcast on a Sunday.
Yeah.
You're a season ticket holder.
Another comment, though, I do agree with from Stole It Breezing, not specifically about hitting 6, but he said, Morel should be hitting, he says 6th until he's hitting again. I do agree. How they construct the lineup is tricky because you have so many guys that aren't performing and you want power in those spots. But I think why I wanted to read that comment was to highlight the sort of problematic nature with how this team was structured. And I think that's a really good example of it. We've looked and talked about some of the really good trends for Morel. He's cut down that K rate. He's upped that walk rate. Some of his plate appearances look like a different person than when he first came into the league. It's really exciting. His batted ball data is really good. I think right now he's rating as the unluckiest player in baseball. And I know some people don't like those expected stats, but the process is really good. It's what you want a 24-year-old player to do. The results will come. But you're relying on him every day to be your cleanup hitter, Brendan. He's got a 195 average and a 678 OPS. I am a huge believer in his offense, but that is so much pressure on him to be your cleanup hitter. And where does it leave the lineup? Hoping that the results start to come? I mean, that's tough from your cleanup hitter, Brendan. We're not talking about them having an elite stud in the cleanup spot. We're talking about, well, hopefully the gap between Morel's expected WOBA and his real WOBA catches up soon because he's our cleanup hitter. It's not good construction. He can be that. I believe he can be that cleanup hitter for this team one day, but that moment might not be right now. And that's just a real tough spot for him, for the offense.
There's no
Is that
solution.
fair?
There's no
solution. I know.
Who are you going to bat cleanup? You're going to bat a struggling Seiya at times. You're going to bat Ian Happ, who people wanted to DFA 10 days ago.
You in the chat saying leadoff, some saying 5th or 6th.
That's fine. I think you put your best hitters top 4, top 5, and see how it works out. I get the angst, though. My angst, again.
And again, my angst isn't towards him. It's just that he's your cleanup hitter.
He is the reason for my optimism this season.
Sure.
Christopher Morel is the reason why I think this team has the potential to surprise and break those projections. I am very much a believer with the bat ball data.
Ditto.
However, I had hoped that this was occurring in the background of bona fide 3-4 hitters.
Absolutely.
That way we don't have these discussions because, quite frankly, this is a stupid discussion.
Well, and this is true for so many of these hitters.
Yeah.
Nobody's freaking out about Ian Happ. People don't care as much about Dansby. Juan Soto's the easy example. Yeah. But if Cody Bellinger is hitting in front of Juan Soto and Ian Happ is putting up a 115 WRC plus, nobody's yelling about Ian Happ. He's a wonderful complementary player. This offense probably looks great. Instead, that's not what we have.
Yeah, that's the problem. I think to use a recent memory, during 2016, which the Cubs won the World Series.
I did see the MVP of that World Series, Ben Zobrist, was at beautiful historic Wrigley Field today.
Of the 2016 World Series.
Yeah, for the Chicago Cubs.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, look at 2016, right? They had kind of an experiment, an expensive one in Jason Hayward, but in the background that was occurring with a 3-4 duo that was a generational duo for this team, right? So I'm fine doing these experiments. I think it's actually necessary to push those extreme outcomes. But the frustration is that you look at players around the league the past 2-3 years and they're playing for other teams. And that's where I'll leave that.
Instead of hoping that Christopher Morel and all those trends coming together, leading him to being a star on offense, is something that takes your offense from being good to great, you are relying on that happening to take you from bad to average.
It's literally for the Cubs to make the playoffs this year.
It has to happen.
It has to happen.
Yeah.
There's no other way this team gets to that point.
Yeah.
All right, let me do the second ad break here, and then we'll come back and continue discussing this wonderful roster that we have in lineup construction for guys who shouldn't be 3-4 on any roster, Corey. What do we got here? So Penrose Brewing, Geneva, Illinois. Seltz Up hard seltzers with real fruit, led by Lemon Seltz Up, a national gold medal winning hard seltzer with real lemons. They created a unique twist on a lemon shake up with a house-made hard seltzer and pureed lemons for a throwback to warm weather and county fairs. Also available is a lemon tea up, a half and half inspired hard seltzer. Just released this year is also their Transfusion Seltz Up, inspired by a popular golf cocktail with grape, ginger, and lime. Penrose is available at your local beverage retailer or visit Penrose's taproom in Geneva. And for more information, go to penrosebrewing.com or follow them on social media. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier, and prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. I've used Game Time. I can attest to that. And with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their low price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. The best part about Game Time for me, Corey, the best customer service. If there's a problem, confusion, I can call them up. I'm like, hey, I don't know how this is working. And I'm talking to a real person. That's why I like Game Time. They have last minute deals. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you want for your entertainment. Save even more when you choose a section and let Game Time choose the seats. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CHGO for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CHGO for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
All right, Brendan. Just want to say appreciate y'all in the YouTube chat. Got a good number of people here joining us live late on a Sunday for a team that hasn't won a series in 3 weeks. So appreciate you guys. That's very, very good to see. I do like this comment from some dude. It says, can we bat the pitcher for the catcher spot? Look, all I'm saying is
here we go.
John Lester's not doing anything. He can out hit Jan for sure at this point.
Well, we know he can run the bases better than some guys.
He's got fundamentals, Brendan. That's the thing. Yeah. Fundamentals. You got to be good at the fundamentals.
That's right.
All right. I think that's what I have on the lineup, and it's some of the same stuff, man. Like, they've been terrible with runners in scoring position. I read that stat from our guy Ryan Herrera from in the month of May and including the 1st of June. Worst team in the league with runners in scoring position. You have to be better situationally, and if you're not a team that's going to hit a bunch of homers and blow guys out, you have to execute situationally. You have to find ways to manufacture runs. And that's not like a play small ball kind of argument, but you have to be good in those spots. You got to run station to station. You have to move runners over, take your walks, hit sack flies, things like that. You got to do those things. But you look up and down this lineup, and we're still on Sunday. The Cubs did not start a single player, Brendan, with an OPS in the 800s. It's all right there. They went, what? At one point, it was a week without hitting a home run. It was like 6 games without hitting a home run before it was Happ, I think. Maybe in Milwaukee that broke that streak. I don't know. Guys have to be better. And I see Tyler in the YouTube chat saying you got to be creative. And I think that's part of it. Like PCA's back. He's got to play every day. Ride it. See what happens. That's one of those things that maybe you get a higher outcome and it sort of jolts things. You have to be aggressive with trying to fix these problems. Some of the guys need to be better. And Hap has turned it around. He's moving those numbers up. He looks better. Things feel better with him. Dansby's got to be better. I think Nico can be better, even on the offensive side. But Nico's Nico. He'll be fine.
He's had a 320 weighted on base average. What the hell are you talking about?
Well, I think he's had stretches. That's all.
Oh, you're being a little bit too heated up over there.
Yeah.
Calm down.
Go
get a lemon seltz up.
Okay.
My God.
Seiya, you need to be better. And as you said too, like Cody Bellinger, 784 OPS. Like maybe you're not going to get MVP level Cody Bellinger, but you need better than that. Yeah. Brendan, you need better than 784 OPS. You need him to at least be somewhat of a force in this lineup. I saw somebody say it earlier in the YouTube chat. Like right now, it doesn't feel like this lineup has anybody that if you're an opposing pitcher, you fear.
That's the issue.
Is there anybody in this lineup that you fear?
Fear is a 10th percentile offensive contributor. They don't have those guys.
You don't have it.
They don't have it. They don't have it.
You don't have it.
They have the potential for it, but the risk is it's potential and not realistic.
Yeah. So that's what I got on the lineup. As I said, go back to our off-season podcasts. We weren't alone in this. That's not me saying it was like our unique thought, but I wasn't happy with this offensive construction. So I think they're going to play better than this, but these stretches are going to happen, and they were quite predictable, actually, for everybody. I think except the front office, I guess. Apparently,
whatever the process in trying to quantify expectations to be fully transparent, it needs to be improved. Whatever the information is being used to make decisions, it has not worked. So I understand there's logical thinking, rational thinking. I understand the process, and I'm actually, again, quite optimistic, although skeptical, but this has just not worked. It needs to be improved. You need to hire certain people. You need to create new departments or occupations or jobs. It needs improvement. It's unacceptable. It's the fourth year in this process, and we need results. I'm sick and talking about a 500 team. Results have to happen, and if it doesn't happen, you know this, after this season in September, October, then we have to have legitimate
You're going to have
conversations.
To have bigger conversations.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm also, as I've said, it's very disappointing. Your starting staff has been so good, and it just feels like on so many occasions,
they've been better.
They have to be perfect,
Steele's
and you're not paying it off. And I think that was highlighted too. There was so much discussion. We're not going to belabor that discussion because that was even last week. But there was so much discussion about Shota's start and how they skipped him and whatever. But it was a highlight too of that guy has been unbelievable for you. Up until that point, he's been the best pitcher in Major League Baseball. And those starts are going to happen. Your starters aren't going to be perfect. They're going to have clunkers of outings, or they're going to have outings where the offense needs to pick the guy up. They picked you up all year, and you just didn't take advantage of how good that stretch was. And at some point, you expect at least some regression from that starting staff. At one point, I think you had 4 guys in your rotation with a sub 2.5 ERA. That's not going to that's not going to stick. These guys have been gutting it out for you and pitching unbelievably, and you still find yourself a few games under 500. You weren't able to pay that off, and in so many of these games, Brendan, 4 or 5 runs would have gotten you there. You would have at least picked up a handful of extra wins, and of course, the bullpen plays some role in that. But again, when you're asking your bullpen to protect a 1-run lead in a 2-1 game every other day, well, I have news for you. Most bullpens aren't going to be able to pull that off. So it is what it is. That part has been disappointing. I do want to talk about the pitching staff a little bit as we're getting towards wrapping up here. Jordan Wicks pitching, working his way back. Sounds like he's going to be back soon. We saw Ben Brown, unbelievable start in Milwaukee. Not so good today on Sunday. We've seen him in a few different roles. You've seen the high ceiling potential. You've seen some of the concerns that he still needs to work through at the major league level. When Jordan Wicks comes back, how might you best structure this rotation? And I think one thing that is glossed over in a lot of these conversations is, as we've talked about, you have a lot of these guys who you do have to kind of think about how you're going to get them to the end of the season. They may only have a certain number of bullets for you this year based on how their arm has been used in the past, how young they are, how inexperienced they are, and you need to massage that a little bit. So how would you maybe best put this together? You putting Wicks right back in the rotation? Who you bumping out? You doing a 6-man? What are you doing here? If Jordan Wicks comes back, let's say it's not this soon, but let's say it was tomorrow. How are you building this rotation?
You're starting the game tomorrow, Jordan Wicks. If that's the case, the moment he's ready, fully ready, 100% full capacity, he's starting. It's not that I think he's the best starting option. I think when you see Ben Brown almost no hit the Milwaukee Brewers, it's quite tantalizing. And the best curveball value in Major League Baseball is Ben Brown's curveball. I understand all of that. But the alternative for me is if Wicks is not starting, well, who's taking his spot as he is in Iowa? Is it going to be Jose Cuas back up? Is it going to be Daniel Palencia returning from rehab? Keegan Thompson returning from rehab? Is it going to be Luke Little's 8 walk per 9 rate? I need right now in June the best arms on this roster and the best utilization of those arms. To me, that's Ben Brown on the roster and Jordan Wicks on the roster. The best way to get value from those two guys, I think right now is shifted a little bit. I think Wicks in the rotation and Ben Brown in the bullpen is probably the one scenario most likely to give you results and value. Ben Brown has exceeded my expectations. The curveball is being used way better than I thought it would be. I'm optimistic more than ever with Ben Brown. Still, his usage in 7th, 8th innings with those two pitch types, it seems pretty confident. It seems like a scenario where I'm not going to freak out about once he's in the game. So to start, I think you give Wicks those opportunities and you move Ben Brown back in the bullpen for the time being, and then you can mix and match when the situation arises to put Brown back in the rotation, because long-term, I do think Brown has moved his potential value into a starting pitcher, given that we're seeing a long sample of really good outcomes from his curveball.
Yeah, I mean, that works for me. I mean, I think we've seen Ben Brown succeed in that kind of long man role, and I think the starts will still be there. You can still mix and match guys, and I do think, again, like you're going to have to manage at some point, even a guy like Assad, you know, by the end of the year, if you continue at this pace, like these guys are going to be you're putting a lot of strain on their arm that they haven't necessarily experienced before, and you got to be prepared for that. You have to be prepared to get to the end of the year. Now, obviously, you know, I think there are a lot of people in our YouTube chat that if I said, you know, if you want to make the playoffs and go deep in the playoffs, they're going to roll their eyes at that suggestion. But you have to think that way. And that doesn't mean punting games now, but it just means what are the guys we have available and how can we make sure these guys are fresh, not just for their next start, if it's against the White Sox here in the next couple days, but for their starts in September. And, you know, Justin Steele, I think a really good example of that last year. They rode him. Same thing. It was the same thing. He had to be perfect most days, and he was most days. But then by the end of the year, like he hadn't done that before at that level, that many starts, that many pitches, that many high leverage innings, especially when you're constantly playing close games, scared of your bullpen, scared of your offense, and you got to be perfect. And that's what a lot of these guys are doing. So by August, September, that's a pretty significant wear and tear. You know, more injuries are going to happen. So I think they've got a lot of good depth there. And I look forward to the opportunity to use it. However they decide to do it, it makes the bullpen better. It gives them more options. It keeps the other guys fresh. So I think that's it'll be a welcome sight to see Jordan Wicks back on the mound. And we'll see how they end up doing it. But the more help, the better.
I do have an animated graph. We were asked about that. 30 seconds, not even. I'll throw it back to you. This is what Ben Brown's curveball looks like. And by the way, Ben Brown, I had just said it a few moments ago, but not only is his curveball the most valuable in Major League Baseball, it's the most valuable by 100% to the second place guy right now. It's been that good. And it's been better against right-handed batters than left-handed batters, but there's no platoon splits. That was the driving question for me going into the year with Ben Brown was, can a 2-pitch guy with a curveball of his caliber play up for platoon splits? Because we don't see anyone with a curveball shape as a starting pitcher with that velocity like Ben Brown's. For example, if you look at his curveball, In red is Ben Brown's curveball. In black is the major league average curveball by just their StatCast numbers. And what you're noticing is that the two dots here, the red pitch and the black pitch, it ends up in the same location, but the trajectory that's used to get to that ending point is quite different. Whereas that black pitch has more sweep, that red pitch just dives. It's what's called a death ball. It just goes right down with not much horizontal break, but it goes down with a lot of drop from a higher release point and at times thrown at 90 miles per hour, Corey. That's why it's so good, right? And so in a bullpen role, that kind of reminded myself of Julian Merriweather's north to south slider. That's why I always thought him being a seventh, eighth, and ninth inning guy would be achievable. But like Justin Steele breaking some of the expectations with two pitch guys and having a slider four seam for Justin Steele. Of course, this success is kind of reminding myself that we missed the expectation on Steele, and maybe we should not ignore the two pitch guy and Ben Brown when the results are so extreme like this. But maybe it's hypocrisy right now. I still think that his value for the team is best served in a bullpen just to maximize the complete arms on this roster, because again, the alternative with Brown and one of those other relievers to me is less than Brown and Wicks on the same major league roster.
Yeah, so I did see a question. I might have lost it. I was from William Ferris about Yency Almonte, and reading this update from Marquise Tony Andracki from the other day. Not great news on the bullpen front. Julian Merriweather won't be back until at least after the All-Star break. He was dealing with that rib stress fracture. He is in a throwing program, but the report was still need at least the next month and a half to progress to big league action. So that does not sound particularly thrilling. And then the update on Yency Almonte, who was dealing with the shoulder injury. He's been throwing off flat ground, but they have not mapped out the next steps for him. So it will be, as Tony Andracki phrases it, a while before we see them soon. ALLCITY, of course, one of those moves today, moved to the 60-day IL. Not great. So the reinforcements there are not just going to pop up out of nowhere. You're going to, and that's why I think the Wicks discussion is a good one. Obviously, Wicks had been in the rotation, so it's sort of an obvious one, but you need all of the at least reliable pitchers that you have. Whatever their role is, that can be figured out later. But if Merriweather was one of, if not, your best reliever last year, you see the usage that they have to put on Mark Leiter Jr., and it affects him. They use him too much. You can see it in the outings that the splitter is just not as effective. He's been really good this year. He'll continue to be this good. But when some of these other guys are struggling, walking too many guys, throwing too many pitches, living on the edge with how they're getting their outs, I understand why Craig Counsell turns to Mark Leiter Jr. as often as he does. Like, they got to try to win some games.
Is he the next Steve Cishek?
He might be. Well, it's interesting because he's sort of equally was David Ross's and now Craig Counsell's Steve Cishek too. Yeah, Joe Madden, Steve Cishek. So, yeah,
he might be his own category. We might be referring to someone else in 10 years from now. Is he the next Mark Leiter?
Yeah. So, but Almonte had shown some good stuff for this team. He may not be back soon, and for Merriweather, you're talking at least about a month and a half.
And then when he comes back, like, is he going to be?
It's a tough process. Yeah, 100%.
Can't really expect.
So it's going to be. You're gonna have to figure that out.
Well, so you have Palencia and Keegan rehabbing.
Yeah.
The one, if you want to be really optimistic, the interesting thing with Keegan is that the whiffs were so high. He has a K count of 14. And, all those nerdy new metrics, if you're interested in it, the bat speed stuff, Keegan Thompson was inducing the lowest bat speed of opposition batters, among them top 5 in the league. So that means he's fooling batters, basically, because they're not swinging their fastest, which means they're, they're fooling themselves. So we'll see if that continues. That's been a pitch type he developed 2 years ago, that new slider that we had talked about with him and Moskos and Tommy Hotovy. So maybe that is one of those unexpected outcomes. And Steele, or rather Keegan Thompson, I still put those two together in the same discussion after all these years. But maybe Keegan Thompson becomes that unexpected late inning guy.
Yeah.
We need someone.
I don't know. I think that's what we have for you today. Tough spot, Brendan. I don't know, man. I think I'm as equally frustrated as anybody else is watching this team. And they've dug themselves quite a hole in the division. That said, you're a wild card team right now. So you, as I keep saying, at some point, hopefully they actually do it, Brendan, but you have to stop this skid. And you would have hoped, again, playing a team that's in last place in your division at home would have been the place to at least get off the series loss streak that you're on. But that wasn't to be. You got to win these 2 games against the White Sox. I know usually these are hotly contested games and series, regardless of where each of these teams.
Cup. It's a big deal.
Yeah. Regardless of where each of these teams are in their respective season, usually they tend to be pretty competitive over the years. You got to win these 2 games. You just don't have a choice. You have to start playing better baseball. And as we talked about at the forefront, we can break down all of these guys, and there's a lot of nuance to the discussion of every one of these individual players. But more than anything, the Chicago Cubs need to play better defense. They need to be smarter and better on the bases, and they have to play a tighter, cleaner brand of baseball. And that would get them pretty far. The offensive things aren't just going to cure themselves overnight. Some of those are going to be ebbs and flows, and you're going to have to deal with them. But some of this other stuff has to get cleaned up right now, tomorrow. It should have been cleaned up at the start of the season. It shouldn't be happening. But it can't go on any longer. We can't, even you look at the game on Saturday, where all those runs that the Reds scored off of errors, I think every single one. I mean, it's unconscionable for a team that was built on defense. I know they were playing in a hurricane or whatever you want to call that in Chicago, but come on, Brendan.
Well, you guys got to get your weather together over there. I need results from your weather too. The Chicago weather has been an atrocity.
Well, okay. Tom Skilling retired.
Figure it out.
Tom Skilling retired. Luke has done the weather before, as you learned. See if we can.
I would love
get him into
Luke to give a weather forecast on one of the shows. We should make that happen.
Yeah. So, I don't know. But at some point, again, you're holding on to a playoff spot right now. It's the beginning of June. It's too early to talk about what happens at the trade deadline or all that other stuff. You just got to start playing better baseball. Guys need to start producing to the level at which they're paid and to the level at which their career norms are. And you got to clean up some of this garbage. You cannot continue to be one of the sloppy. I mean, Brendan, would you, it might be fair to call them the sloppiest team in the league. Second worst defensive metrics, one of the worst in outs on the bases. I don't know what else defines sloppiness. Errors, maybe they make a ton of errors too. So you can't continue. At a bare minimum, that has got to stop. And it's been unacceptable up until this point, and it has to get cleaned up. So take your day off. You have to beat up on the White Sox. They've been one of the worst teams in baseball this year, and this is the type of pressure you put on yourself. You haven't won a series in multiple weeks. That means when a bad team comes to your building, you got to take care of business, because anything less just isn't acceptable. I hate coming on here and calling for sweeps, even in a 2-game series, but you gotta turn it around at some point, Brendan. We can't just keep digging this hole and saying, well, I think they'll be better eventually. Eventually has to come at some point, Brendan.
Well, they're going to win the next 10 games in a row. So It starts with 2, and then you win 3 more. Actually, no, sorry, 4 more. And then you just win, another 4 more after that. It's really not that difficult. I can count to 10 on my fingers. Just saying. Just saying. Am I wrong?
No.
Let's wrap it up over here.
All right. I think that's what we got for you. We do have a CHGO Cubs takeover this week. Check out allchgo.com for the info on that against the Chicago White Sox. Look forward to seeing you at the game, at the bar. It'll be a good time. The Cubs won the last time we did that. Christopher Morel hit a walk-off home run. So
there you go.
The vibes are right, but we'll see. Anyway, thank you for tuning in. It's been a frustrating time for this team, but let's get it turned around. Hope you enjoyed your weekend. Enjoy your off day. Let's beat up on the White Sox. Brendan and I will talk to you next week on Sunday.
Hopefully
Luke, Cody, Ryan, of course, with you all week for your post-game shows. Check out all of Ryan's great written work at allchgo.com. Appreciate you tuning in. Brendan and I will talk to you next week. And as always, go Cubs.
We all silly like the mayor.